Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to be a continuation of a previous lesson from the 9th chapter of Matthew. We will have divided this chapter in 3 parts, the first of which was the first 13 verses. Therein we read that whilst in Capernaum, he heals a paralytic, and he says that the faith is the thing which unlocks the healing. Much that's going to come into play in what we read today. And he also calls the author of this book Matthew, who was a toll collector and a publican, a tax collector, but he forsook his nets or his coin collection and just followed him. So he responded in faith. Then he invites him to dinner, and he mingles his new master with his friends. These are men of ill repute. These are sinners and publicans, and the Pharisees take notice, and they want to know, why did the master deign to sink with such scum? They completely missed the point. The restrictions and limitations of the contemporaneous Jewish religiosity was that the priest and those who were clean could not have anything to do with those who were defiled. But by that logic, your ministry will never extend to where it was needed most. And he rebukes them. And then he answers a question in the beginning in the 14th verse in the lesson we most recently covered. About why do a disciple of John the Baptist approaches him, and he wants to know, why do we and the Pharisees fast, and why do your disciples not? And he says it's inappropriate because he is the bridegroom, and he is in their presence and in their midst. And during a wedding, it would be unthinkable to fast during a time of celebration. So he is the bridegroom, and we the church are the bride. And then he says, if you have an old piece of cloth, you don't tear something from a new piece of cloth to cover it, because that just defeats the purpose. Then you have a pristine new one that is damaged and beyond repair. Neither do they put new wine in old wineskins, or else the wineskins burst, and the wine is spilled, and the wineskins are ruined. But they put the wine into fresh wineskins, and both are preserved. So wineskins were contained in containers that were the exterior was goat skin, and inside them, by the laws of physics, if you put new wine into old wineskins, the wineskins would have already been corrupted, corroded, and incapable of physically containing the new wineskin. So that's something you wouldn't do. And the analogy that he's alluding to is that he did not come to patch up the new covenant. He came to bring the new covenant. He brought something new, a newness of religion and newness of life, and he is the kingdom. And the king, where the king goes, there too is the kingdom. While he was saying all this to them, see, a ruler came and bowed down to him, saying, my daughter is dead by now, but come and lay your hand on her, and she shall live. From other accounts, we know that this man's name was Jairus, and he had a daughter. Here he's bowing down, and this would have been a risk, because he is a ruler of a synagogue. That means he's a rabbi with his own synagogue, own location that looks to him for leadership, and he's bowing down to a man who is on the top 10 out list. He's public enemy number 1 in the Jewish religious establishment. Nevertheless, he prostrates himself with faith because he has nowhere else to turn, and he has the need. His daughter is recently dead, and they're going through the motions of the funeral when he gets there, and we'll read what happens when he does. But while en route, a woman who had an issue of blood for 12 years, she had perpetual blood, and she reaches down and touches the hem of his garment, and her faith was that if she made physical contact with this magnificent healer, then she would be healed and she would be whole. But Yahshua turned, and when he saw her, he said, take courage, daughter, your faith has healed you. And the woman was healed from that hour. So in all instances and miracles in the 9th chapter of Matthew, we witness that faith is the key which unlocks and unleashes the miracle. Where there is faith, no miracle can happen. This was the case in his own native Nazareth, as recorded in Mark 6:6. But because this woman had enough faith, that was all that it took. It wasn't the actual leaning down and touching his garment, but he gave her a free pass. It was good enough. And then when he gets there, the Jewish funeral procession. So I earlier described weddings. During weddings, there would have been a 7-day bachelor party with the bridegroom. In Jewish culture, they did not mess around or observe any restraint in their observance of funerals and weddings. So they even took it to the extra mile in funeral. They would hire professional mourners, people who would wail and lament and wail out loud for the purpose of creating a mournful atmosphere. So they're all there, and he said to them, "Go back, for the girl is not dead, but sleeping." And they laughed at him. They were the flute players, the ones who were hired for the funeral procession. They all knew she was dead, so they laugh at him. He's telling that she is not dead. Dead is permanent, sleep is temporary. So she's not really dead. She's still alive, and he's going to raise her to the left, but they laugh at the suggestion. This is the natural, normal human response. But when the crowd was outside, he went in and took her by the hand, and the girl arose. So same mechanics and same motion as Peter and John, who heal the crippled beggar who was lame from birth in Acts 3. He lifts her up, and just like that, she has life, and she is able to walk. She is alive, and they are outside because he didn't want them, the scoffers and mockers and naysayers, content, because where there is lack of faith, the miracle cannot manifest. He needs them outside the perimeters, and he performs the miracle. And rumor, his reputation spreads by rumor all throughout the land. And this takes us to the 27th verse lesson itself. And as Joshua passed on from there, 2 blind men followed him, crying out and saying, "Son of David, have compassion on us." So this is a new scene. He passed on from there. So he did his deed. He resurrected the recently deceased daughter of a man named Jairus, a synagogue ruler. And then he's passing on there, and while he's going, 2 blind men follow him. Now, blind people are, whenever we read that word in the same in the New Testament, it's pretty much a restoration of sight. So they were blind, or it could also mean metaphorically a spiritual blindness. And they're following him. They're following him physically on the road. They must have been accompanied by friends and well-wishers and people who wanted them to get well, but they do recognize his messianic status. Even though they are physically blind, they are not spiritually blind. They know that he is the Messiah. That title is not used in vain. They understand and acknowledge that he is the promised Messiah, and he has the power to let them free and to open their eyes. And all they're praying, they're leaning on his compassion. They want some compassion, because not every blind person is blind because they are sinners, although some cases it is indicated, but blindness could come from any number one of sources. The important thing is all blind people, they need sight. It's something you need. You and I take it for granted, but life without sight is not really the same thing. And when he came into the house, the blind men came to him, and Joshua said to them, "Do you believe that I am able to do this?" They said to him, "Yes, Master." So they're inside a house. This wasn't on the road. They followed him on the road, and they brought him. I don't know where I read that. Into the house. So this is not done instantaneously or in the immediate call. He summons them into a house, and he asks them a question before he goes through the motions of the miracle. And the question that he wants to know the answer to is, do you believe? Believe is the key which unlocks the miracle. Where there is faith, miracles may manifest. Where there is no faith, no miracle can take place or happen. So he's testing the faith, and do you believe I am able? Now, the blind man we met, in another one, Mark's first chapter, we read of some deformed man a leper who was, he knew that he was able, but he asked if he was willing. So this was a question of his ability, not his intention, but the intention is implied. So he says, "Yes, Master." Then he touched their eyes, saying, "According to your faith, let it be so. Let it be to you." So they had faith that he could bring them sight, and the promise and the manifestation of the miracle was as sure and as solid as their faith. So according to their faith, let it be to you. If you believe that you can lift up a mountain and you have enough faith, it's something you can do, but it would have to be conducive to a kingdom purpose. But faith, once more, is the key which unlocks and unleashes the miracles. So where there is faith, miracles can happen. Where there is no faith, miracles will be missed. And their eyes were opened, and Joshua strictly ordered them, saying, "See, let no one know." So he strictly ordered them. He did not want his identity known. He knew that these two men knew that he was the Messiah, but he didn't want them being blabbermouths out in town because he was operating to a schedule and to attract the attention of being the Messiah so prematurely to his purpose. His hour had not come yet. But in spite of his order, the man disobeys, so he is not a faithful disciple as measured by obedience, having been liberated to a new lease on life. But when they went out, they made him known in all that land. So they hear one thing and, do the exact opposite. There's no indication that they nodded their heads or signaled their approval. What we do know is that once they got out of there, they just did it anyway. So, he is still sovereign and still in control, but they did obey an order. But it was all amalgamated into the providential equation. And as they were going out, see, they brought to him a man, dumb and demon-possessed. Who the they is, that might have been the blind men newly illuminated, and they see a dumb person, that means mute, and demon-possessed, that means the demon within them would have been mute. So in other accounts, such as Luke's 11th chapter, read that the demon was mute, but the man was possessed. But it's a description of the demon. The man was mute because the demon in him was mute. So this man's muteness was from the same source. He was possessed by a demon. That means he was controlled by an invisible being without body, a dark angel who creeps in and can enter a human heart and possess and control them. So he is, for all intents and purpose, no longer his own purpose. That is until he is liberated from the demon, which is diminishing and demeaning his personality. And when the demon was cast out, the dumb one spoke, and the crowds marveled, saying, "It was never seen like this in Israel." So the demon is expelled, and exorcised just like that. It's an instantaneous chain of events that culminates in its the fulfillment of its promise. And the demon is out and never to come back again. And the person, because the mute demon is no longer in them, they have returned and restored control of their ability and power to speak. So, and that they're probably celebrating and praising, but we don't know what they say. All we know is that they were speaking, and then the crowd's reaction is one of unanimous approval. They have never seen this like in Israel. He says, the master himself says the same thing in reference to the faith of the centurion, of the Roman centurion in the 8th chapter of Matthew. So the chapter before this one, and he says, this Gentile officer requests that he heals his servant from a distance, and he says, "I am a man under control and used to giving orders. I know that I recognize your authority. Just say the word, and he will be healed." And he says, no faith I have seen like this in all of Israel. And they say much the same thing here in as many words. They've never seen anything like it. Israel would have been there basically all their lives, of all those people would have been lived in Israel. But the Pharisee said, "He cast out demons by the ruler of the demons," formerly known as Beelzebul. He is the ruler, the lord of the demons. It's just a name for Satan, and that. So they're accusing him of being aligned with Satan, and it's his power that cast out these demons. And in the more famous dialogue of this scurrilous accusation, when he cast out a demon who is mute in Luke 11 and also Matthew 12, they lay the same charge on him then that he does this through the power of Beelzebub. But we witness the master's response to that. We don't witness it in the 9th chapter. And he says, "Are you kidding me? Is a kingdom is a house divided against itself going to stand? Satan is a united, determined foe. There's no division in his kingdom. It is by the finger of the Almighty that I remove these demons." But they just had to come up with something. They were determined to get him, and they couldn't really get him. So they said, well, if you have the power of the demons that we are powerless before, that must mean that you're aligned with Satan. That you're not the son of Elohim, but why would Satan cast out his own legion and own armies? And Yahshua went about the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and every bodily weakness among the people. Therein we learn several facets of his ministry, teaching, preaching, that's proclaiming the good news. So he would have taught in the synagogues, that would have been just Sunday school or just elaborated on scripture, and then he proclaimed, he preached of the kingdom out in the open, sometimes in public, sometimes in synagogues, but most of his sermons do take place outdoors. And he's healing every disease, and a demonic force is powerless before his presence. So no matter what you have it, whether it's leprosy, AIDS, SARS, anything else, his healing touch, there is no disease capable of resisting his healing touch. And every bodily weakness, that means whether it's infirmities or inflammation or just gout or anything else, literally the whole list of conceivable medical conditions, his touch, and this was connected to the kingdom which had come, a kingdom in which there is no disease, death, sin, or suffering, or sorrow. And having seen the crowds, he was moved with compassion for them, because they were weary and scattered, as sheep having no shepherd. This is a sad statement on the tragic condition of apostate Israel. They were sheep without a shepherd. The Pharisees had degenerated into self-worship, self-exaltation. It became a worship of the Pharisees. Then this man comes along who fills in the vacancy and supplies the demand. These people were in need of spiritual leadership, but they had the unfortunate reality, the inescapable reality of being stuck with a system that produced men who saw no ethical qualms in murdering an innocent, but wouldn't step foot in Pontius Pilate's house lest they defile themselves through their Gentile contact. But he is the good shepherd, and we who minister, we are shepherds, pastors. That term is shepherd. So Israel, the ancient Jews, they were a pastoral people, and that's what they filled in ancient Egypt, the vacancy that they didn't do. Then he said to his disciples, "The harvest truly is great, but the workers are few." So the whole world is a harvest, but there's not enough people, ministers in any age, to go out and gather what needs to be done. The supply always, the demand always exceeds the supply in kingdom work. So, the harvest is literally as great as we have a whole world to take, but there's not enough of us to take it. If we got out into the open world and began making disciples who made disciples, then we could win this whole world over for the faith. But we don't have the numbers in us, so we are to pray not only for the global spread, because before the signs of the ends of the time must come, this gospel must be preached from one end of the earth to the other. And we have to pray to bring it in our neighborhoods and also across the world. Pray then that the master of the harvest will send out workers to his harvest. So if you are stuck in your ministry assignment, pray for one to come and enable you and edify you and uplift you and build you up and just help you carry the load out in the world as you go and gather disciples. We are to pray because the demands will always be inferior to the supply. So that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you're here. Stay tuned until next time. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.